Okay, there we go. So it's week 2, day 2. So on the next clean page in your notebook, please write that up at the top, week 2, day 2, so you can keep track of the steps that you need to do and then the assignments that are due on those days, because you will have an assignment today. You are my second hour class, and I have an announcement specifically for second hour only. I have to give you guys a new Google Meet code. So please write this down in your notebook so that you have it and are reminded of it tomorrow, because if you try and log in to our normal Google Meet code tomorrow, we won't be there. So the new Google Meet code is WHS Ceramics 2, because you are second hour. So I somehow messed up the settings for your hour last week, and so I need to change just second hour to have a new login code. So please write this down so that you remember, starting tomorrow and every day after tomorrow, the code will be WHS Ceramics 2. Okay, great. All right, so here are your steps for today. This is something that I want you to write down in your notebook so you have reference of it, please. I'm going to talk you through the steps now, and then I'm going to show you the steps in the demo. So your first step is you need some clay, because you're going to be making your plates today. So first of all, if you have any scrap clay that you've just been throwing in your bag, that might be enough for this project. So you can gather up all that scrap clay and maybe use that. But if you don't have scrap clay, if you just have your block of clay, you're going to take your wire cutter and cut yourself a 1/2 inch thick slice of clay, and then you're going to wedge it. Then we need to flatten that piece of clay so it's about 1/4 of an inch thick. So you're going to flatten your clay either by using the rolling pin I gave you, or your own rolling pin, or the throwing method, which is what I will do because I like that method. It's pretty quick. And so you're going to create a uniform 1/4 of an inch thick slab. And I'll show you in my demo how to test the slab to be sure that it is uniform. You don't want your slab thicker on one side and thinner on the other. Next, you're going to take your paper plate, and you're either going to use the hexagon paper plate that I gave you, or maybe you found your own paper plate at home, and that's fine too. But you're going to put that plate upside down on your slab of clay, and you're going to trace and cut out the slab of clay so that you have a slab that is the same shape and size as your plate. And when you do the cutting, you're probably going to use a toothpick. I threw a bunch of toothpicks in your Ziploc baggie, so this is going to take the place of a needle tool. And when you do the cutting, you have to make sure that you're cutting with the toothpick completely straight and vertical all the way around. It's going to be tempting as you're reaching your hand to the other side to let that toothpick kind of go at an angle. You don't want that, because that's going to give you a weird lip on your plate. So the cuts really do have to be straight up and down all the way around. So be thinking about that real clearly as you're doing your cutting. Then once you have traced and cut out your clay slab to fit your plate, take off any excess clay that you cut away and wedge that up and put it back in your bag, because that's good clay we can use later. And then this is where it gets kind of picky. So try and keep track of these next steps. And if it doesn't make sense, like what I'm telling you, first, second, third, you'll see it in the demo, and hopefully it'll make more sense. So once you have your clay slab cut, you're going to put it on your wood tray. Okay, so the slab is sitting on the wood tray. Then you're going to cut a piece of plastic, and you can use saran wrap or cling wrap if you have that at home, but otherwise you can just cut up a plastic bag so you have a nice flat sheet of plastic, and you're going to put that on top of your slab. Then you're going to take your paper plate and you're going to put that upside down on top of the plastic bag. So you've kind of got a sandwich there of your wood on the bottom, then your clay, then your plastic, then your plate. And the reason you have all that layered on there is because to get your clay into the plate, we're going to do a quick flip. And we're going to flip the slab so that it falls into the plate with the plastic in between the clay and the plate. Because what I learned yesterday, I tried this out yesterday. I'll be honest, this is the first time I've ever done the plate project this way with a paper plate. Usually we do it with plastic plates when you're here in class. So what I learned is when I put the clay directly in the paper plate, it warped the paper plate. When I came in this morning and looked at it, it was all janky and kind of warped. So we're going to have to insert a piece of plastic between the clay and the paper plate, which isn't a big deal. But that's why you're layering it and flipping it, and the plastic is in between. So once you've done that, once you have flipped it and the clay is sitting in the paper plate, you can take the board off of it. And then you're going to use your little sponge that I've given you. And you're going to use a wet sponge to gently press the clay to conform to the plate. So it really hugs the curves and you get that middle part of the plate that's lower and the raised ring of the plate that's higher. And then that's as far as we're going to go for today. You're going to snap a picture of your plate that you've made for today. So it'll look something like this. And you're also, in that same picture, going to have to show me your assignment from yesterday, which you didn't have to submit because it was my birthday and I was giving you a present and me a present. So in the picture, you are also going to have to show your drawing that shows me what design you're planning to put on your plate. So your picture is going to look something like this, except it'll be sitting on the table. And that's worth 20 points. That's due by 10 p.m. And then, because your clay that's sitting in that plate is going to be super saturated and very, very wet, we can't do the design today. It might be enticing to move on to that next step, but we need to firm up that clay first. So you're simply going to take your plate in your clay plate that's in the paper plate. You're going to slide it in a bag and then leave that bag puffed open so it can get leather hard for tomorrow. And then we'll get to do the fun step of adding the designs tomorrow. Okay, so that's it in a nutshell. If you didn't write down these steps, please take a screenshot so that I know that you have these steps in front of you, because they are actually really important that you're following the steps exactly as I've laid them out. Make sure you take your screenshot or finish writing. I'm going to move on in 3, 2, 1. Okay, so I'm going to go to the demo now. And so let me get set up for that. Hopefully you're going to be able to see. Do you want Maya? Do you want to move to that table over there? Otherwise you're going to be in the video, unless you want to be in the video. All right. So I'm going to pin myself. Well, okay. So first off, I'm going to grab my clay. And I have been throwing extra bits of clay as we've been doing our earlier assignments. And I just have a kind of a wad of clay that I think is going to be big enough for the purposes of this assignment. So I'm just going to use this. It's about the size of a grapefruit. If you don't have a wad of extra clay that you've put in your bag, just take your clay cutter and slice yourself a 1/2 inch thick slice of clay. And it's not a big deal if it's not a perfect 1/2 inch thick slice, because remember, that's actually probably going to be more clay than you need. So just approximately a 1/2 inch. Oh, actually, I'm going to leave that open for now. Make sure you wedge your clay so it's prepped and uniform, especially if this is coming from random scraps of clay that you've been throwing in your bag. Really important that you wedge. Okay, and then I'm going to pre-flatten my clay. And then I'm going to do the throwing technique of making a slab, where I'm throwing it diagonally away from myself, and whatever edge is facing away from me, the clay is going to stretch in that direction. So I'm going to throw it and turn, throw it and turn. And if I'm turning a different edge each time, it's going to stretch my clay real evenly. So I need to stretch it till it's about 1/4 inch thick. And I'm throwing it on my canvas. It'll totally stick if you're throwing it on your table. But if you throw it on the canvas or roll it on the canvas, it should be, it shouldn't stick. Okay, so now I'm going to show you how to test your slab and make sure that it's uniform, because that's a big thing I'm going to be looking for, is that the clay slab that makes up your plate is a uniform thickness. So here's how you're going to test that. You're going to take your toothpick and you're going to poke a few holes and test the thickness in that slab. It's kind of like, for those of you who were here during Ceramics A when we did the wheels, we tested the bottom thickness with your needle tool and then marked where the top of the clay was, and that tells you how thick your clay is. So I'm just going to test my slab. I'm going to stab through it with the toothpick, mark with my fingers where the top of the slab is. So that's how thick the slab is there. So now I'm going to test it in a few other spots just to make sure that it's approximately the same thickness. So it's a little thicker on this side here. So I'm just going to take my rolling pin and I'm going to stretch out that side just a little bit more. And my little holes that are in there from poking it, I'm just going to blend those in and they're totally fine. Okay, so now I'm going to I have my consistent 1/4 of an inch thick slab. I'm going to set my plate upside down on top of that slab, and I'm going to take my toothpick and I'm going to hold my toothpick perfectly vertical as I'm doing my cutting. This is what I was talking about earlier. Don't get lazy and let the toothpick start to drift off to the side. It's really important that it stays perfectly vertical because that's going to give you the best lip for your plate. And the lip is going to be a really visible part of the plate. So make sure that you're keeping that toothpick straight up and down. You can take your excess clay away right away. So all this is still perfectly good clay. So I'm going to put this back in my bag. And then I'm going to seal my bag up so that that clay doesn't dry out. Okay, and now here's where we get picky about the steps and the layering. So I'm going to take my plate off temporarily. I'm going to have my tray handy, and just as carefully as I can without damaging the lip of my slab, I'm going to lift it onto my tray. Then I cut out a piece of a plastic bag, and I tried to cut the flat part of the bag, not like where the handles are, where the bag gets all bunchy, because I want my plastic to be nice and flat. And then I'm going to take my plate and I'm going to line it up so that the corners line up with the plate so that it's in the same alignment as it was when I traced it. Okay. So now I'm going to put my thumbs on top, fingers underneath, and I'm just going to do a quick whoop, flip. So now I'm going to take the plate off carefully. The slab might want to stick to the tray, so just be careful as you're taking that off. I'm going to check this and make sure. I'm going to put this on a box so you guys can see it better. Okay, so I'm going to make sure that everything still lines up and my slab didn't shift at all, because it might shift. Okay, great. So now I'm going to take my little sponge. You should all have a little sponge that is in your plastic bag. And I'm going to use kind of my index finger and my middle finger to press through the sponge to get the slab to conform to my plate. I wish I could hold this up and show you better, but I really need the firmness of the table or the box underneath the plate as I'm smoothing, but I'll hold it up now. So hopefully you can see now that I now have a flat spot in the middle, and the rim of my plate is raised. That's my sauce rim or sauce lip that I was telling you about yesterday. That is a mandatory part of this plate. So now I'm going to smooth the edges. I shifted my fingers apart from each other, and I'm kind of making the sponge be a U shape. And so I'm having that U shape skirt around the edges of the plate, so it's smoothing both the outside and the top at the same time. I want to get that lip really nice and smooth. I want to make sure that the clay really is conforming to that paper plate. Be careful, because the plastic is not sticking to the plate. Your clay may want to shift around. The plastic may shift it around. So just, still make sure that everything is lined up the way you want it to be and centered the way you want it to be. So that's looking pretty good. I'll hold it up so you can see it. It's pretty decent. So now my next step would be to take a photograph of my plate in this stage with my notebook next to it, opened up to the page where you did your sketches from yesterday, or your sketch from yesterday. Then once you've snapped your picture, all you have to do is bag this back up. And then just let your bag be loosely open. So a little bit of air can circulate in and dry out your clay for tomorrow, because for tomorrow, we need things to be leather hard. And so by letting the bag be open a little bit, it should allow the clay to get a little bit dry, which is what we want. So that is your process for today. Make sure that you clean up after yourself, of course, and make sure your bag is sealed and tools are cleaned and all of that. And then make sure that you remember to submit your assignment for today. It's kind of a double assignment. Remember, you're submitting the photo of your plate and also of your sketches. Okay. Any questions that I can address generally to everybody before I give you the attendance question?
Oh, yeah. Do you have to wet the sponge before you use it?
Good question. Yes. Not like drippy wet. We don't want to introduce too much water to the clay, but just damp, like put it in the water, squeeze it out, and then that's perfect.
Okay. Thank you.
Good question. Any other questions? Okay, I'm gonna stop recording.